all these 21st century bills that they push into our hands. But the old bill, the dollar bill, which was put into practice through Franklin Roosevelt's administration under Henry Wallace, his Secretary of Interior or Treasury, etc. I'm not sure. We could look it up. So who was also the 33rd Vice President under Roosevelt. He was in coordination, and I recommend a little series of movies. I can't even think of the title, but the man he worked with was a guru or an occultist by the name of Nicholas Roerich, of whom Manly P. Hall was a fellow traveler, I should say, who was an associate, a knower of. In fact, the Manly P. Hall Library out in Los Angeles, California, is littered with Nicholas Roerich regalia, paintings, sculptures, statuettes, and every time you see Nicholas Roerich, he is carrying a small box with him. And this was a little cask, a tiny little cask with something very important inside. And just to go off on a real tangent, some have said that it is the DNA of the beast itself. Okay, but that's not proven, and you know, as we love Antimatter Radio Grupp-ism, we won't follow that yet because there's no proof in that. That's just a story out there. But at any rate, Roerich gave Wallace the inspiration, so to speak, to put this seal on the dollar bill. And Roosevelt, who was a complete occultist, and to be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, it's hard to move back from our Trilateral Commission presidents forward, let alone backwards, that aren't occultists of the first order. In fact, William Jefferson, Mr. C, we'd like to call him, during his duress, under complete judicial scrutiny, on the television, his famous, when he was fumbling around, and he told the entire world, that depends on what your definition of is. What? What is he talking about, right, Ed? What was he going on about? Is. Ice is. ISIS. He was telling his fellow occultist brothers of the higher order out there, I need help. I am submitting myself under the moon goddess herself. I am asking for your help. ISIS, my brothers, I call upon ISIS. And at that moment, those in the know, or the initiates knew, and also those who are aware of how these occultists speak to each other, they were in the know not only, and also the higher creatures who could bid or do him good or do him help out there. They were notified, and of course he survived his impeachment. At any rate,
Bill Clinton. I'm just going to throw in there real quick about Bill Clinton. He was basically unknown before the Bilderberg Group found him in like a year before. Yeah, who is this guy? Where do they come from? Who is the current president? Where do they come from, Ed? Why do we latch onto them like they're old buddies, old pals of the family? Okay, very strange, very strange. But that's worthy of research unto itself. But if we take a look at ISIS, the dollar bill symbol itself is ISIS. It is the S and the two I's superimposed over the S. Okay? So two S's and two I's superimposed as the classic old school on the old cash registers. It would have two lines, two pillars superimposed on a snake. And that is ISIS. As you know, Madame Blavatsky, it's all about ISIS Unveiled, her lengthy, powerful work to other theosophists. Okay, but I'm sorry, I'm just kind of catching my breath here. It's okay. Actually, if you want, there's a caller in queue real quick.
Please.
Okay, just 1 second. Well, okay, my switchboard just freaked out on me. Okay, 1 second. Caller, area code 707, you're on the line.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Hey. What's up?
Hey, I just thought about the bloodlines. Ancient of Ways was mentioning that too. And what do you think about that? And I also have something else to throw in. It's a little off topic, but you'll think it's funny.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, last night this guy was on Coast to Coast, Stan Dio, and he maps out orbits and stuff in the universe, and he's trying to predict Nibiru or whatever the hell that planet's called. And I know Jeffrey did a big thing on the heliocentric model, and that nobody could prove that the everything revolves around the sun, and the Copernican model. So I went through all of that with him. I asked him, can you prove to me that there's evidence for the sun-centered model and that there's evidence for the earth-centered model, that things are not going to disprove this? It's the Newtonian gravity. It never worked off Earth. In other words, dark matter, you know. Right. And does the Earth have a hollow part in the surface of it? And do we need a whole new theory of gravity and extrasolar planets, star fluctuation? That won't work. Stellar aberration won't work. And the redshift information to show the distance between Mars and Earth getting further or closer away based on the heliocentric model. And he never answered. He kept just was like, oh yeah, well, there's evidence for the red shift information to show the distance between us and Saturn. I'm like, okay, prove it. How, you know? And he couldn't. He kept just beating around the bush, and George Norrie didn't have any idea what I was talking about, so I kind of got cut off. But I just tried to do that for Jeffrey because I know he's like, I'll give you $200 if you can prove this.
So I got to cut in here, guys. This is amazing. You totally have my work down. Hey, this is Jeff, by the way. Good to talk to you again. What's your name, by the way?
I called in yesterday about the pineal gland and that whole thing.
Yeah, yep, that's right. What's your YouTube channel again? Give it to us. Go ahead and plug it.
It's BW666D, and that's my YouTube channel. And I sent you an email today on YouTube telling you about it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think I got that. So yeah, you've got you've got all the heliocentrism versus geocentrism worked down pretty well. Very good. So that's interesting. They didn't know what to say. They probably didn't have any idea what you're talking about because they're not even thinking about the whole problem of the heliocentric versus geocentric model. But that's very interesting. Stan Dio, he's a pretty interesting guy, and I'm surprised that he wasn't on it a little bit. But so you're saying they didn't even really know what you were talking about, huh?
Right, yeah. I didn't mention the thing where you mentioned the tides was one way to show that that's still...
Yeah, that's the most amazing thing of all.
Right, but I didn't get to that. I was trying to get to that, but I was like the first caller, and it was just, I just had to spew that out as quick as I could, and I like took notes and wrote everything down, and then I just read it. You know.
Yeah, if Stan Dio told you there's evidence for the redshift of Mars being measured, I'd like to see that because I've looked all over the place because I've had people tell me, oh yeah, we can, with the redshift, we can tell that Mars is retreating from the Earth and going towards the Earth in certain ways, or we can determine that, you know, both us and Mars are going around the sun. Well, if he has the evidence, I'd like to see him send it to me because I've looked everywhere. I can't find any redshift evidence anywhere about anything to do with Mars. So that's just something I think people talk about. It's like, you know, some of that evidence that people talk about as being out there, but if you actually go to try to find it, nobody can find it anywhere. It's like the whole thing of parallax. You know, the ancient way they used to try to measure how far, you know, the planets were from each other and so forth. You know, if anybody actually goes and tries to do it today, none of it works. It all shows that the Earth is at the center of the solar system. But see, nobody does it anymore because you're just kind of told in books that that's the way it is, and nobody needs to do those primitive measurements anymore, and everybody just kind of believes it. So the heliocentrism thing is just so unbelievably amazing. I mean, I've had people email me and say that's the most stunning thing they've ever heard on radio anywhere. I mean, because we're just so programmed from birth to believe, you know, if you don't think the sun is at the center of the solar system, you're an absolute buffoon. But there's just simply no evidence. You know, ask somebody for the evidence, and they don't have any. Didn't you say, Ed, your friend is in an astronomy class in college out by you, and his college professor actually just said on his own volition, just said in class one day, we actually don't have any proof that the heliocentric model is true. It's just the one we use because we like it better or something. Is that right?
Yeah, he said we don't really have any. Yeah, exactly. And he said the only reason they do use it is because things just make more sense that way. Like, that's a really good reason.
Yeah, see, that's just so unbelievable. That's an astronomy professor, and what he's saying is according to his subjective opinion, he just thinks things fit better with the heliocentric model. What he means by that is they don't like the epicycles. If you have a geocentric model, that means as the planets and the sun go around the Earth, they go in little loops as they go around, and people don't like that. And they say, oh, that just can't be right. So therefore, we think it's the heliocentric model with the sun at the center, where you don't have that, is more elegant. And it's completely subjective and biased and so forth. And I had whole shows on these little loopy things that the planets do as they go around the Earth, and it would be called the epicycles. And it does appear there's all kinds of very easy explanations for why that happens. And there's actually bodies all over the solar system. All over the universe. You look out in the universe, and you see stars doing this. They just loop around nothing. Okay, like, for example, Cygnus X1, that star system. So, we've got other examples of other bodies doing this. And I don't want to turn this show into a heliocentric versus. I could go on for the next 3 hours about this issue, but anyways, so yeah, that's very interesting. Colin, did you mention Antimatter Radio at all on Coast to Coast? It doesn't matter if you did. I'm just merely curious.
I tried, but he kept talking. As soon as I finished reading all of my notes, then he tried to answer, and I couldn't get a word in, and then I got cut off. I was going to mention.
Yeah, it's no big deal. I was just merely curious. The real issue is the information itself and stuff. So that's really good that you got that out there. Very, very, very cool. I commend you for that. But anyways, I'll let you guys go. Yeah. I just wanted to cut in.
I thought you'd like that. Cool.
Real tangent. Some have said that it is the DNA of the beast itself. Okay, but that's not proven, and as we love Antimatter Radio Grupp-ism, we won't follow that yet because there's no proof in that. That's just a occultist by the name of Nicholas Roerich, of whom Manly P. Hall was a fellow traveler, I should say, who was an associate, a knower of. In fact, the Manly P. Hall Library out in Los Angeles, California, is littered with Nicholas Roerich regalia, paintings, sculptures, statuettes, and every time you see Nicholas Roerich, he is carrying a small box with him. And this was a little cask, a tiny little cask with something very important inside. Just to go off on all these 21st century bills that they push into our hands. But the old bill, the dollar bill, which was put into practice through Franklin Roosevelt administration under Henry Wallace, his Secretary of Interior or Treasury, etc. I'm not sure. We could look it up. So who was also the 33rd Vice President under Roosevelt. He was in coordination, and I recommend a little series of movies. I can't even think of the title, but the man he worked with was a guru or an occult